Oh,
I know.
tiny, tiny chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're perfect to me. My feet actually touch the ground when I sit now.
How's everyone today? Made it through? Only one more real day this week. So I feel like that's good. So today we're going to work on sort of the second principle for trauma-informed practice. For those of you who were not here last time, the first principle that we went over was basically looking at the effects of trauma being real. And I feel like in this room, I probably don't need to explain that. We are the converted. And then from there, what we went through is, knowing that these things are not necessarily behaviors that are within these kids' control, how can we maintain empathy? How can we sort of extend that to our paras? And then even further, how can we extend that to our school at large? So that's sort of what we went through last time. And again, if you weren't here for it, I've got it. We can do it at any point in time. This week, we're going through the second principle of it, which is ensuring safety and trust. So this is sort of principle number 2. And so that's kind of the order that we're going to go through these things. And I'm not actually sure how long this first one is going to take. So if we need more time, we'll take the time that we need, because again, I think that we are the converted when it comes to ensuring safety is an absolutely vital part of our job. So if we get through it, and then afterwards we go into relationships. I'm aware that I'm preaching to the choir. Are you gonna work from? No, but turn it on. Please. Please. No? Don't know what that means. Thanks. Oh, Jackie, leave my pen away. Do things for me. Oh, one more. Well, I think we missed one. There it is. So when we're talking about safety and trust, safety, the first part that we're going to talk about is like actual physical safety. But then I also sort of want to look at trust in terms of like psychological safety, because that's kind of what it is, right? So when we are in a place where we feel safe, both physically and emotionally, and all of those sort of holistic things, then we're better able to learn. So developing positive student relationships is incredibly critical for that. I feel, again, like we're above the curve in terms of knowing that for our students. I think we see it firsthand every day about how poorly things go if we don't have student relationships. Trauma's normal, right? Like it's normal. Everybody, like we don't ride for free. Nobody does. But I think where this goes is that the effects of it are not the same for everyone, right? So Dwayne and I can go through the same situation and both come out the other side of it with very, very different effects. And how much it affects Dwayne, how much it affects myself. I would argue it's things like level of support that you have, the capacity that you have at the time, right? Are you already at a 9 out of 10 and you don't really have the capacity to take much more? The skill set that you already have. So those events, just because they happen, doesn't mean that you are going to be traumatized by them, right? Maybe, but the effects of trauma are very different. And I think the biggest part of that is that when we're looking at all of these things, we're kind of looking at things like they're only a problem if they're a problem. If they're not a problem, don't worry about it. School and what our role is in school. And I feel like Jackie, you probably are I'm gonna say what I say, and then Jackie probably has more to say on this. So I'm just putting you on the spot. You're welcome.
I don't want to be videotaped.
You don't want me in the video?
No, go ahead.
Richard does not care about you, Jackie.
He's gonna.
Oh, I know, and he'll feel like so impressed.
He should.
In terms of like what our role is in school, and there are people in this room, it's Jackie, who are qualified to deal with the effects of trauma. Linda is not. I am not involved in trauma-based care, right? So what my role is for trauma in the classroom is to be a listening ear. I'm not digging for it, right? I'm not asking you to go through all of your weekend and tell me all the traumatic things that happened to you this weekend and yada, yada, yada. So my role is if you happen to come to me with it, then I can listen to it, I can show empathy. And my line always at the end was, thanks for trusting me with your story, right? I am not here to counsel you. It's not my role. Do you have more to say on that?
No.
She really doesn't want to talk on camera.
No.
No, she really doesn't. Can you van away from me? And unless we've got more to talk about. Make sense?
What is the solution now though? Like I've talked to my counselor once this year, cause she's never in my building. And none of these kids are going to see a private counselor. So like, do we have a new path of what we want to do? Like, are we trying to get them connected to mental health so they might get some counseling through that? Or like, what is our best strategy to actually get them any help?
Well, I think like I can answer that if you want, but I think that it's a very hard question to answer because everything is situational, and I don't know about your counselor being in the room or whatever, but that would be our way. In school, we don't do therapy either.
No,
We
I
don't,
know.
right? So if there are mental health things, if there's a trauma that needs to be looked at, that does go through the counselor to make that bridge to an outside agency. We as counselors wouldn't do that in the school anyways, but that is where you need to go. An email, phone call to admin, or whatever that might look like for you in order to get that support. Yes, we're trying to bridge it to outside supports at this point in time.
Is mainly the only way for them to get it without paying through mental health? Like,
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily. I mean, mental health is a great support. We use it a lot, but it all depends on what it is, right? Some, it's just kind of digging into what the family has for resources too, because some families do have EFAP, some families do, qualify for other outside agencies. It's just getting in there and finding that piece out is what we need, and then we refer them on.
But in terms of our four walls, okay, unless, and some of you might, and I don't know all of your background, unless you have a background in being able to counsel trauma, that is not our role within the four walls of your classroom. If we can get them outside support, obviously we want to do that. That would be ideal for everybody. But that, at least for me, is not a skill set that I have. So, thanks for sharing your story. That's my line. Should we keep going?
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
So if you add a parent to junior like this week, we say, what is your mental health involvement, and they don't have any, our first line is then to get our counselor to chat with them, is that
Yeah.
how we'll?
Yeah. Or it depends on why we're bringing it up, right?
Right.
So it's like, is there a reason why we're bringing it up? Like, we wouldn't just approach it like with every student, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, if they're saying like, yeah, we would like some supports, then that's who you would go to, because that's the person in your building that has that knowledge.
Yeah. That's the source for it. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit now about like the physical safety of this. And so some of us have kids with big explosive behaviors and some of us don't. So safety can look different in terms of whatever it is in your school and in your classroom. Okay, so during situations where there is a lot of potential for kids to be re-traumatized. So for me, the biggest ones that come to my mind are things like seclusion, right? So, come away, time out, suspensions, all of those things that have, again, because we may or may not know what the history is from these kids, but all of those things have a very strong potential to re-traumatize a kid who has really significant behaviors. And I sort of feel like, we talked about this last time we weren't here, if kids have significant behaviors, you should just assume trauma until you learn otherwise. It's sort of a baseline. If they don't, no harm, no foul, right? But if they do, and we're not dealing with it properly, then there can be really strong potential to re-traumatize. So this is the kind of situations where there is that potential. So, I had a kid who had very explosive behaviors, and in previous schools and stuff like that, often they were sort of put into the safe room, and they were, the idea was to keep this kid safe. And I think I've done it, some of us have done it. But those are the kind of situations that we're talking about. Like, we're not talking about the kids lipping you off, right? Like, that's not what we're doing these types of plans for. We're doing them for big events that have potential to re-traumatize. For those ones, this is a very fancy way of saying, consider just losing that fight. Consider just cutting it off. Doing whatever you need to do to stop the behavior in its tracks. I know it doesn't feel right sometimes. Have that quote in here. Reinforcing dangerous problem behavior may seem antithetical to a good behavioral intervention, but when it serves to turn dangerous behavior off in the moment, it may prevent escalation. So if we can prevent that escalation, we keep them in the learning longer. And if we have good plans in place, we're hopefully dealing with giving them some skills so they don't need to do that anymore. But it keeps them from being re-traumatized, keeps them in our learning environment. It gives us more chances to work with them. So again, I know there's often some pushback. It's like, if you pick a battle, you've got to win the battle. But here what I'm talking about is that if winning that battle means re-traumatizing that kid, I don't think it's worth it. That's my opinion. I don't think there's anything that at least goes on in my classroom that is important enough to risk re-traumatizing a kid over. There is no grade 4 math that is that significant that's worth me doing that. I also think, they're not always listening to us, but if we can show them, if we can teach them that nonviolence is always an option, that seems like a much more important thing to teach them than really anything else that we can give them, right? It models that behavior that you do not need to resort to violence. You don't need to resort to seclusion or restraint or whatever it happens to be. We can choose other things. And then we're gonna try to go through a plan, just basically an example plan about how we might be able to plan for one of our kids. So Jackie, do you want, I think the next one is just what we're doing with it. So I'm gonna grab my sheet, my little useless clicker.
No, it's just
Oh,
here.
we don't need it for us to see. That's why she gets paid the big bucks. Okay. On this pleasant note, I want you to look at these things. So this is basically how I go through, and lots of people call it a safety plan. I'm calling it a prevention plan, because that's the goal behind this. The goal is to prevent these big behaviors before they start. And often when I see safety plans, what I feel like is if I just went around my house and lit a bunch of candles and just left them there, just left them. But not to worry, because I have a great evacuation plan. Okay? So I feel like, again, what we're trying to do here is figure out how can we blow out some of these candles? How can we make it so that this type of unsafe behavior is less likely to occur, so that we can maybe get those rates down, and how a plan for that to be put in place. First one, and I think the one that we can look at, is classroom environment. So just some ideas about when you're looking at this. So things like, are their basic needs being met? Have they slept? Have they eaten? Where's here, like proximity, where are they sitting? Proximity to the exits, that kind of stuff. So for this one, Colin, are you so tired already? Yeah, I'm so excited about this. Call them out.
Coffee.
Yeah, it's not me. So what I would think that we would do for this one is basically between you and a partner or a group, think about one kid in your class who you think we could try to increase a little bit of safety for score, and try to think of an example about just going through this first one. So what does the classroom environment look like for this kid? Are there ways that we can modify it? The answer might be no. The answer might be we've nailed it already. And then if that's the case, number 2, triggers. Okay, what are some things, so if we're talking about Jackie's behavior curve, and I'm going to do it on here. So on that behavior curve, are there things in this part of the curve that we can catch so that we can basically try to prompt them away from it, do something else to get them from hitting that peak. So triggers that would indicate that things are about to start going. What's the next one? Actually, I'll maybe leave you with those two. Hopefully that won't take us too long, and then we'll move on to the third. If you happen to move on to the next ones, and you're welcome to do so. You have an idea what we're doing? Excellent. On the other. What are you gonna do?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Trying to have that, right, just contact with them.
Just honestly, it's just an example. Just to like.
You can.
Yeah, well,
Like five.
That's
That's
easy.
easy.
Candid.
Like video games and stuff, and adults are playing them with, like, they're buying video games, right? Like, that's where I'm stuck right now, is like, we're playing together. And like,
I would just be sitting on their
right.
when I'm seeing school like X, Y, and Z. Some that so related to the things that are happening in the video games. This is our thing, right? And then if they say yes, then you can say, I wonder if there's a different game where you can try to play because bonding and spending time together is important. And just content is safe for them.
Age-appropriate.
Yeah. Right, absolutely nothing wrong with it. But just like that, so, and if that
And then
is going
means
to school,
Yeah.
we don't want that.
Contact.
Like Mario Kart could be a good one. Yeah, everybody. But just, yeah. But just, I would like to help them realize that impact with facts. Like, here's what we're seeing in school. Is there any exposure to things like this at home, through media, or media texts to see if they can make that connection? But it is generally, they have
Parents are allowed to do
yeah,
things
they can do
that we
whatever they
don't
want, yeah.
necessarily agree with.
Yeah, and they bought their own machine and they want to watch it. I think their dad did the game of choice, and my kid is sleeping with me, so doing it together. Mario Kart is fun, yeah.
Grab me a control. I
But,
gotta
yeah,
spend another hour on this.
yeah, but no, it's. Thank you, Brittany, even if they're like, recognizing that connection. Mr. had asked on this, his heart's so darn. But if they're not, when you get it, like, that makes sense. I wouldn't push it, because you don't wanna break their relationship.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, a lot of thought goes into it. You're still learning.
Can we've got people in here who have to have your kind of experience, if you get called out, which is can I ask you?
She's gonna lose.
You are
He's gonna use
can I ask you to talk a little bit about exits? Can I ask you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you think about when you place kids, like when you decide where kids are gonna sit and all that kind of stuff? And we've got people in here, and myself included, I don't have that kind of experience with it.
And it's not like you sit them there and don't use the language, like if it's
No,
just
and it's all,
you roll with it.
mostly just the common sense thing where, oh, he's up and about.
It's not that common.
Yeah, like
He's
if we're a
going to work in an
wanderer, he
alternate
can
one,
stand here.
and he needs an alternate space over there, and we have the balance board up here, so you can just put up and you can be on it right there,
Yep.
and then come back. Couple proximity with the E.
Yep.
At the back.
While in telling you guys, that's gonna get called. This is your pre-warning, your pre-warning, yeah. You can do it.
But the break those are all, like, so it was, we moved buildings, so it was like, okay, we gotta clean everything up.
Exactly what to
And they didn't start doing this, so this is okay. One's going here right by the door, one's right there beside me. And
One's right
the
by
other
me.
is- One's right by me, and the other one, he's back there because he can't be by him or she.
And what grade is
I just,
he? So is that like
grade 5
Where is it?
So like, I don't want them to come to you at work and get them out, but I think that's where my struggle is they don't.
And because
Smaller, everything's smaller, it's hard to look.
good help and not overwhelming. And I think we have this
So nobody asks, that answers my question. Running around.
those are kids who.
Absolutely, no, absolutely.
So that might be where it's like.
Andrew told me about, one of the brothers, Sam's brother, that
Yeah.
he told him, like, oh.
I really don't, Dad wanted them all in.
He's like, yeah, I'm gonna do a couple things here, and I'll meet an Alex program. Because he doesn't know if I act up, and I told him I go here.
And this is where I
Well, I
can.
do some other things. And he needs it.
It's not that that.
See, and that's where I struggle with balance too, is fun things to kind of get them to buy, especially one and then they put it out because I think it's a fix. But we've been.
So the other thing that I had a good amount of success with is doing things where you need to know how to talk about it. So it's lots of things, reverse integration, it's bringing some people up here to do some things, and then it's connecting with, with the other teachers. And my big selling point is, you get 3 more adults. Often, when we're doing something like this, some kids pull themselves out, you get 5 kids and 3 adults joining in your journey. So we have more support to go out and do something, whatever it is. Having their join and doing it often for us.
Can I call everybody back?
So I was always, they were always here to open that. Yeah, and so just to build some of that capacity. Yeah, having some people here, but also then doing some things with the class.
Yeah, Dee's feeding us,
Say, okay,
so.
take this little, go out and then have that support to go, okay, if I can't be right in here looking, cause I've got one that is anxiety so high, like who's gotta be back here watching those 3 over there and then figure out, can I join them yet? No, where is it?
Dwayne, I'm gonna call you out.
Okay.
So I was over there, and so, but again, I think most of us know, like Dwayne's had lots and lots of experience, and he was saying sort of some of the things that he does in terms of, placing kids. And so I'm hoping that you can just share with me.
Sure, we were just saying, this was a great year to rethink it too, because we moved the class from King George to Caswell. I had 5 students come and a couple joining, so just even going in, getting a new space ready and being able to know some of them and say, all right, he needs lots of breaks, he's gonna be in and out of the room with or without somebody, so, right, he's just close to the door, he disrupts fewer people. Often there's one that just needs to be proximity, the EA works there with kids usually, so he's just close there. There's another that is proximity to you, that you can just be tapping on his desk to get his attention or being close, cause for myself, it's usually spending most of my time out at the front or that kind of thing, and then just the balance of, right, knowing some of them that will just can't be beside each other, right, all those common things of when you're putting kids in a room. And then, yeah, just having a couple things in the space. At the front, I've got just a little balance board that during any period, I'm amazed at how many of them will go to it. I just thought it was gonna be my front couple that were doing it, but everyone else likes to come up and have a little break and just try and balance, and then they'll go back and get to work and just have that little bit of a body break that's usually not too disruptive. And then for our full body break, we'll do a little competition who can balance the longest, and we go back, and then they want to go track old people yoga. Yeah, so just right often, I mean, for myself, it's just those kind of common sense kind of things that you just, well, you know, this isn't gonna work to have him in the middle, because now he has access to everybody and he likes everybody's attention. So having him at the back with the AA close by so they can have that discussion, then it can be, all right, let's get back on track, because I'm with you most of the day anyway.
Thanks. Anybody else?
It is crazy how you can have 6 and you can't get them far enough to leave. Right? Like, it's like, no, like, I don't know how many times I've rearranged, and it's like, it's 6 kids, how am I gonna be that far?
And that's,
How many more
we're still-
combinations are there?
Yeah.
Still
The other one is
limited,
that,
right?
like, the one that doesn't like to be looked at, and so it's like, well, then you're at the front. So if they're looking at you, it means you're looking at them. So, you know, and just things you don't sometimes think of, but it's like, yeah, so many little things.
Any triggers that anybody and stuff? I know those are often pretty kid specific. One that I feel like most of us would know this. The one that I did that probably made the most difference was having, for kids who took their meds at home, having an extra dose of meds at school for when they forget. Because that, again, it just sets them, it's such an easy thing to minimize that potential for a pretty darn bad day. I mean, you have to get parents on board and all that kind of stuff, but it's just something to consider that, it was one of the ones that was most effective for me. Others? Good. Okay, so now I'm gonna draw that behavior curve on here. And, have we seen this one? Jackie, have you done this one? I'm sure you've done this one with them.
Well, I do it all the time in my stuff, but I don't know if I present it.
Okay. So all it really represents is basically like the lead up to some sort of like explosive behavior and then the recovery afterwards. So what we're still trying to deal with is basically this side of it, right? How can we prevent it from going to here? So again, triggers, all of that kind of stuff, all that environmental stuff. So like, again, have you been fed? Have you slept? Have you had your meds? Are you in the right spot? Have you had enough body breaks? All of those things to try to prevent them. Now what we're gonna talk about with number 3 is basically when we start moving into this curve. So thinking about that kid and start thinking about the things that kind of make your spidey senses go, you're like, ooh. And I had one where it was a very, very distinct, there was fists that would go up. This was sort of a lower end. So it was like, kind of like a here on that behavior curve. But if we could catch that, then we can do what we need to do. Really, it was often this person, it was a break. We could give them the break that they needed before we hit peak. And so that's kind of the things that we're looking for number 3, are what are those indicators that are things that are starting to tick up, that we're starting to go, and for some kids, honestly, I feel like that behavior curve is like this, right? Like there's no indicators. Again, often if you look closely enough, there's often like at least a little something. So can we find those indicators that things are not going well, and when we see them, what are we going to prompt them to do to try to keep them out of here? So Again, my example was fists. It's like, this person loved to go outside, loved to be outside, and we just call it hot lapping the rink. And the student would just go outside and just hot lap the rink until they were better, and come back in. So that's kind of an example of what we're looking for. So think about this kid, think about those low-end problem behaviors and what you're gonna do when you see them. Okay? Proceed. Usually you can.
Oh.
No, they literally turn their head and
Didn't actually have to happen. And
Usually go to there, the minutes are there, but right there. This proximity isn't working for you, but sometimes they can help with that. We won't go towards that.
And then was it just like, was that
but he loves puzzles, so I just sit there quietly with him while I'm sharing the puzzles until he eventually just starts to speak, just so if he would have them pictures or it's so fun to hear and start to get them at that point they're ready to show it's gone. So then I think movement rather than conversation is safe movement.
oh, cool.
Escalation.
you ask questions.
Body, more.
Yeah.
Well, that, they will actually go in there.
Chewing on balloons.
Right, it's not. Kids are not normal in class. Yeah.
Yes.
The opposite of this.
Yes.
Mine not used for one week. Taking a couple on finger breaks. They're really great. Jason wants to do command.
Which,
Young Jason.
oh, okay, okay.
I just sit in our station and make sure we're let's do just regular class. Frustration.
Extra curve, frustration.
Learning one, you are an expert on everything.
Expecting to pick it up.
You really stick
Yes.
out when you're in
Yeah.
I just honestly, there's something about being outside.
So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We were at scratching, writing, and words, and there are a few other things. You want to just
I don't like your
Just like open some things and he's throwing out stuff because that's really in there and not so bad. Or we teachers had a parent
Oh, whatever, yeah.
One of the other kids, that's why we had a lot on that last year. It's okay.
Got an idea?
Lot.
Good. That's
Well,
good.
we do, no, like, I mean, we have the common
Here,
here.
I have that, I have the bathroom here, there we have another space behind the cupboard that they go to, so it's a big bag on there. Different seating options.
I was actually thinking about you, because you said they've got a kid right now who like when this kind of, we started to get just regular, like literally, yeah, which really surprised me when I started Mountain, because I was like, why not? Like, why don't you just go have a break? That seems like a really reasonable thing to do, and it seems like it'd be a great thing. Right? And I think the other thing, is that, right, they're just completely shut down. And I think the other thing that's happened, at least with Monica, is that they have a very long history of when you go to those places, you're in trouble. And so there's a very strong connection between the removal of me out of the classroom, whatever it is, to another place where it's like, well, I'm not even in trouble. Like, why do I have to go? I'm not in trouble. And so we had to work lots with our guys about having those breaks at times where they were in like the proverbial green zone, so that they get used to it, and it sort of breaks that connection between, you know, this isn't a punishment, right? This isn't a bad thing.
Staff, right, do that and be there, and all that space. Because a couple, this is
They just lose it.
like, they're judging me, they're not making fun of me, they're listening to me, they talk, they interact with me in a nice way. And that.
More of a co-regulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, most of them need co-regulation, that's the thing.
And we all do
That's
for
self-regulation skills,
right?
you need that person to show you how to regulate.
And then start talking about.
She's too positive. I'm too positive.
You're too positive.
Perez kid's voice.
Honestly, I feel like the balance kids, if that's the worst thing they're saying, they're like probably
Too positive. I don't want to hear her voice. Sounds just like her.
So now I'm gonna record my voice saying things like, great job, don't do that.
I've got buttons on my.
right, and they just write it.
I've got buttons on my smartboard.
Yeah.
So I connect to recording for doing it.
Yeah, we should. What else do you say to them all the time? Let's try that again. Let's think of something else.
Come back when you're
Let's
ready.
do that.
Yeah, don't.
And that's, I
Don't
think, what I
do
do
that.
with the guy that shuts down, like I just kind of walk away and say, okay.
I was gonna say, your kids really use that area all the time just to, for good.
Yeah, shut down.
The problem today was he shut down in his room, exploding, so I was trying to clear the room, and he gets to his part, and he went, and then I'm in the hall with him, and he's like, pretty mad, and I'm like, why, like, thanks so much for walking into the room, like, they also needed some extra time in the classroom. He's like, I thought you were leaving because of me. No. And it switched him, but so somebody else was throwing stuff out of the room, right? And I'm like, I'm not holding them in there, so they needed the room.
Like, cleaning that shutdown safe that he wasn't
That
gonna
he's
use the safety, that's huge.
Right.
Very big.
I mean, on his way out, he attempted to do chairs and stuff, but I don't
Yeah.
care, he got out, he
But he
left.
left.
And again, he thought it was because of him, and it was this other kid was like blowing up, and I'm like, let's just get the room out so he can blow
So
up.
at least he has, some make a choice.
Except all my work bag is in my car, and I have a social worker. First I can't get somebody.
When you're ready. This other kid,
Like, works every time.
yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, that'll fun.
Go back now.
I think then they're not.
You did good. I was thinking that was.
Yeah. That's the strong.
She's do it. So, and if they did it for lunch, why are we not?
That's true.
I think maybe started for one and said they weren't gonna do it or something like that, but I'm not sure why. Okay, let me know.
Yeah, I will.
art is one of the worst and best because we're working on something that they don't see and examples of things that looks like this. What I've seen was nothing.
Okay, so I'm going to call you back just again for a second. Yeah. So we've got two more sort of to go through on this one, and basically one is looking at peak. So if we do hit peak, which again I think most of us have experienced that within our classrooms. So I think the idea is, you know, if we do hit peak, what are we doing, right? And I think there's a couple of things to think about with this one, is that if we do hit sort of a peak type situation, we are no longer in a place where we are trying to sort of educate. What we are doing is trying to manage safety, manage dignity, and basically try to get those behaviors under control as quickly as possible. I think everything up to that, so all of this side of the curve, we're still trying to educate them. We're still trying to prompt the right thing, get you to, you know, take a break, do whatever you need to do. That's still the goal. When we're here, it's no longer the goal. The goal is manage this in the safest and most dignified way that you can. The other thing I want you to think about when you're sort of making these like peak plans is if a peak does occur, what it means is that everything else that you have done has been insufficient, right? So it's not a judgment thing. It is not sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Like I had, again, the same kid with fists, where we went and took school photos. Everything looked like it was going great. As we were walking back, this young person just started like ripping apart these bulletin boards. And it was like, what in the actual heck happened between the gym and here? Like, right, so those things absolutely happen, and it's really not a judgment thing, but what it does require is if you hit a peak, it requires some reflection. It requires you and your team to go back and to look at things like, did we miss something? Is there something that, you know, in that curve that we didn't know about before that now we do know about, so we can keep it on this end? So those are the things that I want you to think about when you're talking about those peak escalations, is how do we maintain safety and dignity, right? We are not trying to educate. And then when it is done, how do you and your team reflect on it to try to prevent it from happening again? Last one is prevention plan. So we were just talking about this over here, where it's like, you know, we ask these kids to go for a break, but when they're hot, often it's really hard to get them to do it at that point in time. And so just this idea that whatever it is that you are planning to do as your prevention plan, make sure that you have a plan to practice it when they're calm and regulated, so that it's really deeply ingrained in that behavioral repertoire when they actually need it. So when it's here, it's already easy for them to do. It's not a new skill. Okay, we'll do that. Yeah, so before again, but just like I just couldn't understand, like what? Just what I was saying. I know, and it can be these very little teeny tiny things. No, and that's just it. But then if they're those big peaks, I do think it's like okay, so he just moved it bam. And set them off. So like, was there stuff going on before? Do we need to move these kids apart? Do we need to?
And then he said, I want to ride your cougar and it's funny.
As much as you can. Not that I think you're trying to.
S's are hard.
It's something to think about. Yes. Oh.
and you got into that power struggle.
That's exactly right, and that's most of me, it's just like, if I would've just been better grown up, I could've probably done that better, and we could've had a better time.
We get started.
Well, and then, this big thing about accidents and mistakes right now, between them, so I've been seeing accidents. Essentially, that what I meant, she's not violent, and then I'm talking that way. You said it, and then
Like, there was just, like, all of these things.
and bank yourself.
I saw it.
And I don't bank, so I don't know when you can throw them out.
It was funny.
Don't preface it with
I'll
that.
eat it by the river.
Pardon?
I'll eat by the river.
Yeah, just take it with you.
I'll eat this later, like you
Yeah.
do with kids. Oh, thank you.
Right,
Ivy.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
There was so much I figured out.
My own kids, what's wrong with them? They don't, nobody lives with me anymore. I'm like, well, nobody's eating it now.
I'm trying to keep it with you. I'm trying to
But it's been hard to get
And it is, like, it is.
We have full research.
You better get better at this quick, because if not, somebody is going to.
I'm like, now after a couple more years of making stories, we might be outliers. There's no one else.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to worry. I just.
At this point, do we go, okay,
Yeah, yeah, it is. And community, right? Like now your kids even though they're not, they're now
But we will, depending on the time, whatever, our guys are still no, 10 minutes.
clever.
But it built right in.
Maybe that's high.
But if you guys really want to play your card.
What?
Assuming you get playing that, it's pretty classy, and then if it's turn.
Not that I've heard of.
It's a really nice pages.
That doesn't mean he wasn't though. I wonder if he's been showing up. He's totally online.
And also was like, right, yeah, I've got a couple of things.
And then we do, our beginning.
Yeah.
I mean,
Check goes away, why we check. Cause I was the weatherman up front.
Right, yeah.
So organizational planning, we're talking, we look at the week, okay, what are we gonna wear? Hey, we're gonna be. Yeah, we can transfer with it. Can you draft the weather report? Make predictions and talk about Oh, it's a little different this year. Yeah, without too much support, a couple maybe lost, but for the most part, there are a few. Big part is trying to set it up so that you have
So we did that.
A little bit of teaching.
Super cute though.
I know. So that's the other. Yeah, and art. And I do. They need to be doing something, so I have, all right, here's your.
And that's what I was doing, is writing something on their desk when they came in, and I said, it's a choice if they do it or not, so none of them were doing it, so then I'm like, okay, well, that's either something that you're not, either you read, or causing issues, because that's what happens when you walk around and poke the bear, right?
Close off, right?
It's nice with the cards, because you have.
But nobody cares about mine.
It's 3 or 4, and then there's one, I want grade 7 work.
So everyone, it's 4 o'clock, and I know we didn't get to the rest of it, so I think we'll just sort of that on to the next one. But I do really want to thank you guys for coming. I know that your time is very precious, and I appreciate you guys coming very much. And again, if you have comments for me or anything like that, I'm all ears, and you're welcome to keep discussing if that's what you're doing, but so much match that is, it's 4 o'clock over here.
Thanks, Lynette.